initiates ventricular depolarization somewhere in the ventricles that is not initiated within the autorhythmic cells, but outside the autorhythmic cells, what will our QRS complex be?
Wide.
Say it again.
Wide.
Every time?
Yes.
Yeah.
That make sense?
Yes.
How wide that is going to be determined by what?
Where the signal starts?
How fast cells depolarize?
How close one of the muscle cells is to a Purkinje fiber?
Because why?
Because it could jump on. It can jump on the Purkinje fiber.
So therefore, those cells, Purkinje fibers is what you're naming right now, would have to be what?
Alive.
Okay. Who said that? Functional. Good. So therefore, the width of the QRS complex, if the pacemaking site happens outside the autorhythmic cells, how wide it is therefore determined by
The functionality of the autorhythmic cells?
the functionality of the autorhythmic cells. Because at some point in time, depolarization of those autorhythmic cells will happen via what?
It's going to go
They're
from
pacemaker.
gap junction to them,
Yeah.
and they're going to fire the way they
Via backwards action in the gap junctions, that's right. Right? So how wide it is really determined by if we have any functioning autorhythmic cells within that system as well. If we start here, right? If we start somewhere over here, outside the autorhythmic cells, that will start traveling cell to cell. Yes?
Yes.
It's going to start going cell to cell. And that's going to take time. But if we have functioning autorhythmic cells, and this site just happened to get control over everything first before those autorhythmic cells had a chance to fire, then if we have functioning but non-refractory autorhythmic cells, then eventually that signal might pop into that autorhythmic cell circuit. And when it does, it'll just feed backwards along those autorhythmic cells
And finish off the signal.
and finish off the rest of the signal via those autorhythmic cells. So it's possible that that width of the QRS complex would be a variety of different widths depending on whether or not those autorhythmic cells are going to be entered into the mix or not. There's a couple of different things that can happen here. One, those autorhythmic cells could be completely offline. We could have a problem with the functioning of the autorhythmic cells for some reason. Either because the blood supply that was feeding those autorhythmic cells was disrupted and therefore those autorhythmic cells are ischemic and non-functioning, or it could be a mix of signals where they're still getting supraventricular signals, but those supraventricular signals keep getting cut by the fact that this jumps in and the signals get mixed at the end. They get dead-ended at the end. That's possible too, right? There could be all kinds of different things that are happening that make those autorhythmic cells non-functioning, or they could be functioning. That'll change both the shape and the width of the QRS complex, right? If the autorhythmic cells are functioning, yet our pacemaker site is outside of those autorhythmic cells, then my QRS complex would be less in terms of its timing, and also what? What else would I see it look like?
Be more rounded if it's outside.
No.
Autorhythmic cells are functioning.
No, well, it would be rounded and tilted with the rhythm cells, and then it would be spiked.
Yeah, because so it might look a little bit more normal than we would expect, right? It would look less rounded and more normal if some of those autorhythmic cells are still functioning and if that circuit is still being used. Does that make sense? If that circuit is not being used, those autorhythmic cells are non-functioning somehow, there's blocks along them someplace, or there's dead tissue there, then it's quite possible that we don't see any autorhythmic cell at all, and everything is just cell to cell, in which case the QRS complexes would be very rounded, wide, and bizarre. Does that make sense? So we might have a range of different things. But if we have a pacemaking site in the ventricles outside the autorhythmic cells, the QRS complex is always what? It is always wide, which means what?
Cell to cell.
I'm sorry,
Greater than 1.2.
thank you.
Point 1.2.
0.12 or wide, 0.12 or greater.
Will it be rounded as well?
Go back to exactly what we just talked about.
Yeah,
It depends on whether or not we have action in those odd rhythmic cells.
right.
But it will always be what?
Wide.
Will it ever be narrow?
Maybe if it was like right next to.
Nope.
Say that again, Dustin.
Nope.
Because you know that the answer is no, because what did we say before?
It
What word did we use before?
always.
And always has a pretty interesting connotation to it, doesn't it? So, in a ventricular rhythm, one that is initiated in the ventricles, the pacemaking site is in the ventricles, but outside the odd rhythmic cells, the QRS complex will always be,
Wide.
will it ever be narrow?
No.
Therefore, if I have a narrow QRS complex, is it possible for me to also have a ventricular rhythm?
No.
Because why?
It's not wide.
And ventricular rhythms have what?
Wide.
How often?
Always.
Are we being clear?
Could you say it one more time?
I
Yeah.
can.
One more time, please.
Write it down.
If I have a narrow QRS, what kind of rhythm do I have?
Not-
Supraventricular.
Supraventricular. If I have a wide QRS complex, what rhythm do I always have?
A ventricular.
If I have a wide QRS complex, what rhythm do I always have?
Ventricular.
A cell to cell.
If I have a wide QRS complex, what kind of rhythm will I always have?
Not supraventricular.
Not ventricular.
You're smiling over there. Is that because you know the answer?
We all
I
know.
changed the way that I asked the question. If I have a wide QRS complex, what kind of rhythm do I have?
Ventricular.
Not atrial. So.
Not supraventricular. I agree with you.
So let me ask you this.
Diagonal.
It is a
I'll ask that
You gotta
question one
figure
more
it
Yeah,
time.
just one.
non-autorhythmic.
I'm going to ask the question one more time in a minute. Let's say that we've got something going on here, right? This is probably the biggest concept you need to understand about these rhythms, the width of the QRS complex. Let's say we've got something going on here. This bundle branch is called what?
The right bundle branch.
The right bundle branch. The right bundle branch, yes?
Yes.
This bundle branch is called the what?
Left.
The left bundle branch. Okay? Please draw for me what our EKG will look like. Start with a normal EKG, and then I want you to make the change in what will happen here. Let's say that I have a normal functioning heart. We're going to start with that. A normal functioning heart. And then, in this normal functioning heart, there is a piece of dead tissue now. And that dead tissue is right here. And because of that dead tissue, our signal coming down the left bundle branch stopped right there and could no longer travel any further in the autorhythmic cells that are south of it. So these autorhythmic cells are no longer in the mix. Please draw what your EKG would look like. Good morning. The what?
Open that.
Like you think this is funny, Mark?
feel free to talk about it for a moment.
We can discuss, I didn't even ask. So I think that the beginning of the QRS would be narrow, and then the second half of the QRS would be wide.
Like that?
Like this, like this is normal, so this is narrow, and then it gets
I just
wider.
kind of made it feel like it'd be a notch in the QRS, and I tried to draw it like on the other side, but I screwed up.
Why would you do that?
Huh?
What?
Because the signal's transmitted fast, as in almost instantaneously, and because there's a block, some of those cells are going to go cell to cell, and it's slow.
Why wouldn't it be wider? Why wouldn't it be wider?
It's just going to be a notch because
Before you
it's
look up
going
the
normal and then it'll
answer,
stop.
tell me
It's not the answer.
Well,
No, I just remember you had to look
part of
at
it's going
V1,
fast, so you can have a
and
normal
then you had to
signal
look, yeah,
underlying
two other leads to see
a
it.
slightly wide signal in terms of two.
I don't remember having smaller two copies. It's kind of right in the book ones, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, I could look at that too, with the bundle branch block, but,
With left and right bundle branch blocks, you need a 12 to see it.
but wouldn't it be wide? Because
But
all
some
this,
of it, so some of it,
But I don't know about
some of it
some of it
would
would
be
be
narrow.
narrow, so you'd still have an instant
Yeah.
stroke, but then you'd have, when it's coming back down, you'd have some that are still contracting, so it's gonna widen out at the backside of it. But it'll be like a notch. To me, it'll be like it's going straight up, and then as it comes back down, the signal in the EKG, it'd be notched to show those other ones that are still
It
contracting
wouldn't just
slower.
be like a tent, like a wider triangle.
No, because the beginning will still happen, because some of those, the majority of the signal is still getting passed.
Okay,
Instantly.
well, so left is going towards it, so it would be,
Or one side or the other is of the QRS will be wide. Is what I'm thinking.
I pretty much agree with. I think the first spike will be pretty sharp as per normal, and then as you're getting, the left side's going to be done contracting, but the right side will still be contracting, so it's going to be a slower kind of.
See, that's what I asked. I couldn't remember how to determine.
But where's your
that
notch?
left, but I knew there were bone branches and
are you saying like as it comes down, it like,
Okay, so you do agree that.
I don't remember which is which.
why would it be a bunny ear?
Huh?
Why would it be a round ear?
I think
It's
that's
one of the, I
think
think it's the right side of bundle branches, but
the blurred S wave. The bunny ears would probably be that left block.
left.
Because you have more contractile cells right there. It'd be my theory.
What do you think?
But I thought it was a notches on the left side of the QRS or notches on the right side of the QRS was left and right. But he disproved that to me earlier. I couldn't remember what it was.
I know for sure to see a bundle branch block, you need 12 lead. I know that.
Because you can't see it.
Yeah, to name, right, and to name it, you need to see it.
Okay, talk me through it. This table. This table, talk me through it. If this is normal, how will that change if I have this circumstance?
Well, the signal would come down from the SA node through the atrial pathways to the AV node. And then when it, after the split of the bundle branches, it would continue down the right side normally. And then the left side, it would continue going cell by cell.
So what will be different?
So the QRS would start steep, but then it would, so we'll start with the P wave. The P wave will be normal and the same as that previous P wave. And then, the ST segment will be, I'm sorry, that's after.
You're right.
That segment is gonna be the same as well.
Okay.
And then when the QRS complex begins, it'll start steep,
Okay.
but then round out, and just, it'll round out and not be as steep as the other.
Okay.
And then, that's where I got stuck as to what would happen after that, because in my mind, the right side is going to repolarize faster than the left side, because it depolarized faster.
Anyone have an idea on what might happen there?
Like two of them, two inverted T waves maybe? Like one with a notch in it? I don't know.
Do we all agree at least with everything through the QRS complex?
Up to, yeah.
Up to the QRS complex? So you agree, you don't agree with the QRS complex?
No, I don't, but that's.
Okay, what did you agree with?
I think it'll still, because there's less tissue, less going on the right side, it'll start back down steep and then, widen out just slightly.
What do you mean start back down?
So it wouldn't be rounded at the top as much, it would be more straight up and down.
You think it's gonna be something like
Yeah,
that?
and then come back down, more steep, and then once it reaches that, so come back down straight. No, and then stop, and then notch somewhere else.
And then notch?
Yeah, like that. Let's go like that.
Okay. When does the left side start getting its signal?
At the same time as the right.
Yeah, okay. Jim?
I think everything up to QRS is the same, the start of the QS, so the R wave from baseline up and then back to baseline would be the same. And then as the signal goes, yeah, so once it gets to baseline, it's gonna continue down like the other one does, but then when it comes back up to baseline, it's gonna be significantly rounded. And then back to your baseline, and then you'll have a normal normal T wave, maybe slightly a little bit longer, but
Something like that?
yeah.
Fine. What's common amongst what all three of these individuals have said?
They're wide.
Do we all agree with that? You all agree that it's gonna widen out the QRS complex?
Yes.
And if it's a wider QRS complex, give me numbers, because I would like you to think of numbers.
Greater than 0.12.
0.12 or greater.
Including 0.12.
Okay, scratch all this, don't worry about it right now. If I have a narrow QRS complex, what kind of rhythm do I have?
Supraventricular.
If I have a wide QRS complex, what kind of rhythm do I have?
Ventricular.
No, it's not ventricular, because you just pointed
Is
out.
this ventricular?
No.
Does it have a wide QRS?
Yes.
If I have a narrow QRS complex, what kind of rhythm do I have?
Supraventricular,
If I have a wide QRS complex, what kind of rhythm do I have?
a cell to cell.
No. You could have
Ventricular cell to
ventricular,
cell.
you could have atrial, you could have junction, I mean, it's not starting in the ventricle, so.
It?
It's not?
It is. Yeah,
What
you're
if- What
right.
if I have this? What if
It's
I have
not
this
starting.
rhythm? Is that starting in the ventricles?
Yes.
So that refutes what you just said.
Well, I'm saying it doesn't have to start in the.
So if I have a wide QRS complex, what kind of rhythm do I have?
Autorhythmic, not autorhythmic.
A non-supraventricular? Is this not supraventricular?
It is.
So,
So you could have a
I'm really
supraventricular,
confused.
a ventricular, you have somewhere in the ventricles,
What's
it
that?
going, somewhere, a rhythm that's somewhere in the ventricle, it goes cell to cell.
Great, so what kind of rhythm is it?
I lost,
Don't say ventricular.
I lost my cheat sheet from somewhere between that table and here.
Tell me what's happening.
There's a blockage.
A block in the
I don't want you, don't tell me we know what's happening because I gave you an example of what's happening. So I asked that
Oh,
question.
it would be a regular rhythm?
It would be?
Boom, I got the start of it. You guys finish it.
What if I have this rhythm?
I don't think.
Is that regular?
I think you got shot down.
Yeah.
If I have a narrow
Put my
QRS
glasses
complex,
back
what kind of
on.
rhythm do I have?
Supraventricular.
Super, boy, we've got that down.
Yeah,
Okay?
we got it.
Solid on that.
Yeah.
Do I need to ask you what supraventricular rhythms are? Give me three rhythmic generating places for supraventricular rhythms.
SA node,
SA node,
AV node,
AV node,
the junction.
junction. Are we good with that?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. If I have a wide complex rhythm, what kind of rhythm is it?
Maybe idioventricular?
What's that?
Idioventricular?
Is it? Is this idioventricular? What is this?
That's a sinus rhythm.
This is a sinus rhythm. Is sinus rhythms idioventricular?
With a block of some sort.
Oh, who said that? Did you say something?
Annalise always says something
What'd you
smart.
say?
I said, what is idioventricular?
Oh, we'll get there in just a moment.
God dang it,
I'm
why?
gonna define it today.
But you just said it.
I know, we're gonna define it
Well,
today.
we're still stuck on this point.
I still need an answer to my question though.
Well, we give you an answer, you just didn't like it.
What's that?
Any rhythm?
Say that again? Say that again?
Any of them?
Any rhythm, that's the beginning of it.
Any rhythm. Any rhythm except for which one? Which two?
Supraventricular.
Is this supraventricular?
Sinus.
What rhythm can we guarantee it is not if we have a wide Curious complex? Asystole, absolutely. That's exactly what I'm going for. There is one more rhythm we can guarantee it is not if we have a wide complex Curious complex.
Yep, that's why I said it quietly, without you being on mute.
What other rhythm besides asystole can we guarantee it is not if we have a wide Curious complex?
Nope, don't say it.
What if I have this? Where I believe those are P waves.
And you can't tell if
There's only one other rhythm that we can guarantee it's not if we have a wide Curious complex. Asystole and
sinus, normal sinus rhythm? But that's not normal.
It's sinus.
It's a sinus rhythm.
you guys gotta get this. I'm gonna sit here, we will sit here until midnight until you get this one other rhythm. I don't,
V-fib?
what, say that again?
Defib.
Yes!
Boom, Cory!
Do we have Curious complexes in V-fib?
No.
No! Do we have Curious complexes in asystole?
No.
So therefore we can't have a wide Curious complex in either of those rhythms.
Sweet!
We made
Fantastic.
it.
So if I have a wide Curious complex, what kind of rhythm can I have?
Any rhythm other
Any
than,
other rhythm. That's right. If I have a ventricular rhythm, what kind of Curious complex do I have?
Wide.
Every time?
Yes.
Every single time?
Yes.
every time.
Because if it's not wide, what is it?
Supraventricular.
Do you understand how that direction works?
Yes.
It's really important.
Could you say it again though?
Yes.
All of it?
Yes.
From like,
If I have a wide QRS complex, I could have any rhythm except V-fib or asystole, and therefore I need more investigation. Specifically, I need investigation into whether or not there is what?
Bundle branch block.
A P wave.
No.
Because I need to find out if it's supraventricular or not. And P waves will help me to determine if it's supraventricular or not. Right?
Yes.
But if I know that I have a ventricular rhythm, what kind of Curious complex will I have? Absolutely.
Wide.
Do you understand that?
Yes.
Okay, that's really important because you don't jump in and just assume that a wide complex rhythm is ventricular. Right? We investigate to find out if it's ventricular or if it's supraventricular, and we just gave one example. There's many examples. Here's one example of how you might have a wide complex supraventricular rhythm. So not all wide complex rhythms are ventricular, but all ventricular rhythms are what?
Wide.
Have wide QRS complexes. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Good? Okay. We good?
Oh, that was fun.
All right. That being said, because I don't want Annalise to have a seizure, at the same time of frustrating Chad by not answering his question, or the question that he made Annalise ask, that is, if I have a wide complex rhythm, that means the QRS complex is wide, yes?
Yes.
If I have a wide complex rhythm that is not supraventricular, Therefore, I do not have P waves that are discernible, or those P waves are not associated with the QRS complexes at all, and therefore I believe the QRS complexes are firing on their own. The ventricles are firing on their own, and if I have no autonomic nervous system interaction with it at this point, then I will have a wide, complex, slow rhythm. The speed of my rhythm will be what?
40 to 80.
Somewhere between 20 and 40,
40.
and it'll be a wide, complex rhythm. So I will have a wide, complex rhythm, whatever that is, that moves very slowly, but is regular, and that rhythm is what we refer to as idioventricular.
Can you say that again?
If I have a rhythm where the QRS complex is coming from the ventricles, I know it's not supraventricular. It's a wide complex that does not have P waves that are causing the QRS. And it is traveling at a rate of 20 to 40. Rate is 20 to 40, which is the inherent firing rate of the ventricles. Then this ventricular rhythm is referred to as idioventricular.
So a third-degree heart block can be an idioventricular rhythm?
So a third-degree heart block can have what we would call an idioventricular escape, meaning a third-degree heart block with a functioning AV portion or a functioning junction would have a narrow complex, right? So we would say that it is a third-degree heart block that has a supraventricular escape. If it's a wide complex in that third-degree heart block, then we would say it's a third-degree heart block that has a ventricular escape. And we have an idioventricular rhythm underneath it. So an idioventricular rhythm could have P waves if it's in the third-degree heart block range or an AV dissociation, or no P waves.
So I just want to reiterate what you just said. If we have a third-degree heart block that has a narrow QRS, then the signal is coming from or coming through the septum.
I didn't say that.
I didn't.
Originating.
No, you did not say that. So, how does a narrow QRS in a third-degree heart block be narrow?
Because it could come
If
from
it's
the AV or the junction.
Man, I'm gonna use this picture. This needs to be in the back of my t-shirt right here.
That's what we should have on the t-shirt.
I'll wear it tomorrow.
So in a third-degree heart block, we have a heart block in the AV node somewhere, right? So here's my block. I can't get past that point. What's going to happen if my ventricular signal is initiated from
I'm
that
sorry,
cell
I
right
was
there?
thinking it below the AV node. Okay, so the AV node is starting the signal.
Which is
makes
still, this is
somewhere.
still below the AV node.
Huh?
That's still below the AV node,
Starting in the autorhythmic cells.
but it's still in the autorhythmic cells and it's still above the bone branches.
Which is a higher intrinsic current.
But if it's in one bundle branch starting, then it's gonna be slower
Then it'll slow it down,
and widen it
typically.
out.
That's right. So
Do
an
you, wait, the
idioventricular
block or
rhythm.
the start?
An idioventricular rhythm is
Start.
a ventricular rhythm at its inherent ventricular rate. We call it idioventricular. It's okay if you call it a ventricular rhythm or an idioventricular rhythm. It's common clinically for us to call it idioventricular. Idio is a fancy word that means, we don't know, it's just doing it because it has to.
Just idiot.
That's what it means. Idiopathic means there's a disease process that we don't know about. Idiopathic, sometimes you'll have you'll get a reaction of some sort, and they'll go, well, that was idiopathic. And that's just a fancy of me saying, you have the reaction. We see that you have the reaction. We don't know why you have the reaction. Who knows? I know. I know. That makes sense? So, idioventricular rhythm is a ventricular rhythm that's going 20 to 40. It's ventricular, therefore we know the QRS complexes are what?
Why?
And how else do we know that it's ventricular?
No views.
No P waves, or at least no P waves that are associated with those QRSs. Right?
Okay, I have a question.
You bet.
How do you create the association between a P wave and the QRS line?
How are they associated? How do they get associated with each other?
The P wave causes the QRS.
Correct. The P wave
The
gets the
signal
AV node,
originates.
initiates the AV node, and the AV node sends a signal. So the conduction is continuous. We know that when we look at an EKG by what features?
1-to-1 ratio between.
1-to-1 ratios and
Same PR interval.
equal PR intervals all the way through on all of them. That's how we measure out that that's actually happening. Right? Okay. Because Noah and Dustin are like, hellbent on talking about it. If I have an idioventricular rhythm that is going above 100, what do I have?
Venus tag.
Venus?
Wow! I said it so confidently too. Son of an idiot. Ventricular tachycardia.
Let's try again.
Ventricular tachycardia.
VTAC!
Good. So
Yes, I did.
You had
Venus.
your chance, man.
if my rate is greater,
Story of my life.
if my rate is greater than 100, I do not have venous tach. I don't even know what my veins are doing.
No, but I played him.
But I do have ventricular tachycardia.
I know, I'm gonna go watch this video just because of that.
I do have venous.
Retweet?
That make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a gap here. There's a gap that's greater than 40 and less than 100. I have a gap. So what's that?
Accelerated.
Accelerated idioventricular. That's right. So I've got idioventricular, accelerated idioventricular, and ventricular tachycardia are my three possibilities. That make sense? And those rhythms can come with an AV dissociation or not. Meaning they can come where you see P waves intermixed in them or not, depending on if there's atrial activity or not. Good.
How often do we see VTAC between 100 and 150?
Often.
Often.
Yeah, VTACs aren't necessarily going 200 or 250 or fast.
Is it more so asymptomatic VTACs would be between 100 and 150?
I would argue you almost never have asymptomatic VTAC.
Okay.
You have VTAC with pulses,
Yeah.
you have VTAC without pulses, and every once in a while you get a VTAC where somebody isn't experiencing any major symptoms, but most commonly we'll see some symptoms that come from a VTAC.
I know I'm probably going to have to answer this, but I'm going to ask it anyway. What would cause a VTAC? When, would it be sympathetic innervation or sympathetic effects, or would it be?
Sometimes it's sympathetic mediated, sometimes it is disease mediated, or a combination of both. So you have a disease that is affecting the AV node and not allowing conduction to occur, or a process that's causing that to happen. We have a pacemaker site in the ventricles that is firing, and sympathetic innervation is causing it to fire fast. Sometimes it's drug induced. Sometimes it's disease induced. The only difference between VFib and VTAC is if we had one pacemaking site in the ventricles get control over everything instead of a whole bunch firing at the same time. And that's completely based on economics, right? That's statistics. Which is why we lump those two together, pulses, VTAC, and VFib, because whether it started with one pacemaking site or a bunch of pacemaking sites is completely based on statistics at that moment in time in that heart.
Our VTAC over 150 that's stable is treatment with amiodarone,
Okay?
right? What if we have VTAC stable between 100 and 150? Do we still treat with amiodarone?
Depending on if you have symptoms or not, and whether or not this person has to be converted or not. Amiodarone can be used.
I'm just thinking of our algorithm. Our algorithm says above 130. I'm putting myself in boxes again.
So stop. You have a patient to look at.
And so if we have unsymptomatic VTAC, I guess the question is, why are we here? But if we see,
You may not be doing anything for them. If they have no symptoms that they're exhibiting, well, you can do something. You'll take them in, let a cardiologist take a look at them and see if they can find cellular disruption, or if they need to start thinking about pacemakers, or if they need to start thinking about ablation or something to that effect.
but if they're asymptomatic, then we don't
You
treat.
may not do anything, other than get them to the cardiologist that can actually take a look at the deeper root of
what's
the
going on.
problem
Okay.
and see if we can fix that root.
If they're asymptomatic at 130, 150, we might want to think more about
We
it.
good? Questions? Yeah? Okay, so what happens if we have a normal sinus rhythm? A normal sinus rhythm in a person. And while this normal sinus rhythm is happening, at some point in time while you're monitoring them, you notice that, wow, their normal P wave QRS complex didn't occur, and a half a second later, a wide complex QRS pops in, and then it seems to go right back to a normal sinus rhythm again.
Can you
So
say
I
that one more
asked,
time?
You have a normal sinus rhythm cooking
Yeah.
along, and as you're watching this normal sinus rhythm, you notice that, wow, their cardiac cycle didn't happen. They didn't have a P wave, they didn't have a QRS, and a half a second or so later, a wide complex comes in, and then right after that, it goes right back to a normal sinus rhythm again. What have we got?
And then it continues normal without that
And
happening
just
again?
continues on.
So the ventricular escaping.
Yeah. We have a ventricular escape.
after.
Y'all understand what I just
Oh,
said?
that's not premature.
I understand what you said, but why did we have a P wave? Was there just something happened and that one
I don't know.
cycled, something?
So,
I scared you.
I am not privy to that information. I don't know why they didn't have a ventricular, or why they didn't have a P wave. I don't know. Maybe the P wave decided to take a vacation for a moment. Maybe it decided to induce that drug that you just had and
I can
took a moment.
remember that.
Maybe there was one beat of the heart where the blood supply that was coming through the coronary arteries just randomly skipped that one portion, because it's all economics. It's all statistics. In any event, we had everything pumping along normally. We had something that looked like that. We caliper this out. We were expecting everything to start happening right here, and it didn't. And then we saw this thing come in. That's a terrible drawing, but who cares? We saw this thing come in, and then we're back to normal again. So what do we have?
Ventricular escaping.
So here we had a ventricular escape.
And the P waves would march out before and after.
I don't know. It depends. What does that depend on?
compensated
If
or
it affected,
uncompensated.
if it affected the.
Depends on why the P wave went away.
Depends on why the P wave went away.
Yeah.
If the P wave went away because the SA node failed, then what would happen here?
It'd be on a different time.
You'd be
We'd be on a different time. If the P wave went away but had nothing to do with the SA node, so the SA node is still functioning, then what would probably happen here?
Come back in time.
They'd probably come back in time. So that just depends on what's going on, right? What if I'm in that exact same circumstance? I'm in this exact same circumstance, but as I'm watching my QRS complexes pound away, I'm expecting it to come in here, but I'm surprised. And I'm surprised because, oh, something came in here. And then it goes back into my normal sinus rhythm. Good. So in this case, I had a premature ventricular complex that came in. Make sense? Questions with that? Okay. With PACs and PJCs, what's my QRS complex typically?
Narrow.
Narrow, and what does it look like compared to all the other ones that I have seen in that same strip?
Similar.
Yeah, pretty much the same. Barring a couple of things like if there's a retrograde or or an antegrade P wave in a PJC that might change the beginning or end of my QRS complex. But for the most part, my QRS complex is the same. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
My QRS complex in a PVC, however, is obviously very different, right? Because it's happening someplace in the ventricles that's causing a cell-to-cell transmission of those contractile cells. Does that make sense? Okay, if I were to see, say, 2 PACs in a row, what are those QRS complexes going to look like? The two,
Say that again.
I see 2 PACs in a row. Those 2 PAC complexes are going to look like what? The same. And those 2 QRS complexes from the PAC are going to look like what compared to the rest of my rhythm?
Similar.
Good. And if I add 2 PJCs in a row, what will those 2 QRS complexes look like compared to each other?
The same.
And those 2 PJCs will look like what compared to the other complexes in my rhythm?
The rest is the same.
They should look the same. Because they're all coming from where?
Supraventricular.
They're all coming supraventricular, which means they're all following the same pathway through the ventricles and through those Purkinje factors. Does that make sense?
Uh-huh.
But my PVCs are coming from some different place in the ventricles. Let's look at it this way.
That's the first time I've seen him draw that picture.
Okay.
Really?
If I'm looking at it this way, what will my QRS complex look like? So my SA node fires, and my QRS complex looks like this. That's my given. So I'm comparing to this. Okay. Whoa. Pardon me. What will my QRS complex look like if this site causes a premature beat?
The same.
The same as this. Do we agree?
Yeah.
What will happen if that site causes my QRS complex?
The same.
What will happen if that site causes my QRS complex?
Same thing.
What will happen if this site causes my QRS complex?
Same thing.
What will happen if that site causes my QRS complex?
Same thing.
Okay, so if I have 2 PACs in a row, and one is initiated by this site, and one is initiated by that site, what will those 2 QRS complexes look like in those 2 different PACs?
Same.
Even though they came from 2 different initiating sites?
Yes.
Wouldn't your P-wave morphology?
We're not talking about
be
P-wave.
I'm not asking about P-wave, I'm asking about the
With
QRS.
the exception of where the underlying downward reflection of the P wave is underneath, but the underlying rhythm would be the same.
Okay. But yes, the P-wave would look different.
Yeah, it could be.
You're absolutely right, Emily. But I'm not talking about QRSs. I mean, I'm talking about P-waves, I'm talking about the QRS, because I want to key in on this QRS for a minute. Okay, so no matter where my PAC or PJC has been initiated from, my QRS complex typically should be what? The same as the rest of the rhythm. Do we agree?
Yes.
Okay. What happens though if I have in my ventricles a PVC that is initiated by here, and immediately after that a PVC is initiated from here?
It'll be look different.
Polymorphic.
What will my QRS complexes be?
Different.
Different from each other.
Yes.
What will each of them be compared to the normal QRS?
Why?
Yeah, also different.
Different.
So, for example, this one might have been coming from this site, but this one would look very different. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So with PACs and PJCs, my QRS complexes are going to end up looking the same as normal QRS complexes because the initiation of the QRS complex is still coming from the same place once it gets to the QRS. Does that make sense? But my PVCs might be different. So with PVCs, I have to go a step further. Just like with PACs, I had to determine if they were conducted or not conducted. With PVCs, I need to determine if they are monomorphic or monofocal or multifocal. Are they coming from one spot in the ventricles, or are they coming from multiple spots in the ventricles. Does that make sense? So I will say something like, this is a unifocal PVC or a multifocal PVC. Unifocal, that obviously this is only if I have more than one PVC, right? If I see one PVC, I only have one PVC. But as soon as I get 2 or more PVCs, I want to know, are they unifocal PVCs, meaning it's the same spot in the heart that is causing this PVC action every time? Or are they multifocal PVCs, and those PVCs are coming from different spots in the heart? Does that make sense? Unifocal or multifocal? Okay. Yep.
Can the same be said about ventricular escape beat?
Same can be said about escape beats as well. So I could have unifocal escape beats or multifocal escape beats. We don't commonly see it that way because those escape beats are starting to initiate a whole another rhythm, but we do commonly see it with PVCs. But the same could be true of both. So unifocal or multifocal PVCs. Good? If we see 2 PVCs in a row, we call it a couplet. A couplet. There's 2 of them.